dreamed to be a superstar. I dreamed to be successful as my own purposes by the graduate. I dreamed that one day I would wake up to my mother and our destructive structures. My dream is to do something meaningful with my life and hopefully contribute to the fight for people with disabilities and to run a marathon. Strength and joy and love. My dream is to publish a paper about what I've found in research before graduating from college. Finally have blonde hair and bottom braces in my dream. In school, I was back in high school to take state tests and judges. My dreams have advanced in music.
I would say that Midwinter Dreams is an interdisciplinary project that involves visual arts, dance, music.
What was beautiful about it was that he was willing and able to pull us all together from different disciplines and create one of the first large collaborations at Mount Holyoke College, and I really respected that.
Tian and I were introduced through a mutual friend. We met for lunch, and he was exploding with energy. When he started to describe this project and his alternative use of space, of Chapin, I was really interested.
I think, my primary contribution first and foremost is the music, as I'm trained as a conductor. The production itself can be very, very hard to explain because it's interdisciplinary, it has so many different aspects to it.
So I think the idea was to take the score of Midsummer's Night's Dream and get rid of the libretto, get rid of the text, and then Tian reorganized the music in a way that made sense to him as a sort of dynamic through line.
And so then he started to talk about how he was going to take Mendelssohn's work apart and rearrange it, and how he was going to work with Robert Honstein, how this composer was going to make pieces that were inspired by unlikely characters in Shakespeare's work. All of that really, really interested me.
Rhee had the beautiful dream pods that she was imagining floating in the sky.
We have made a lot of these, hundreds. We're getting everyone around the Mount Holyoke community to sign just a dream or an aspiration. People have written anything from I want to fly a plane to I want to finish my finals, I want to see my family over break, a lot of different things.
And the next step was to lay them all out so that way we could see them. I think they were just in lines. I don't know. They were just in lines, and then they get sewn in groups of 5. So it's kind of one of those things that you start with a small unit and you make them larger and larger and larger, so that way it's easier to handle.
Those of us who are from Mount Holyoke have been familiar with this beautiful paper sculpture that's been in the Mount Holyoke Library since last year. And this is created by Rhee Hachiyanagi from the Studio Art Department.
But art making is so much more about learning with your hands, with your body, and this is just a tactile experience that I want you to remember this consistency. He had the idea of using paper. That's why he approached me after seeing my paper installation in the library. And when I began listening to the music and really thinking about dreams, that's when I did not want the piece of paper to be flat. I really wanted the paper to hold those dreams inside. Natural fiber length makes this to be so translucent.
Robert Honstein was commissioned to make a couple pieces that sort of fed off of some of the score material, and it was this sort of contemporary. It reminded me of train breaks in New York City sometimes, just really contemporary take on the music. And that was interspersed among the different pieces from Midwinter's Night.
Well, I met Tian at grad school. We were both at Yale School of Music together, and we took a class. I think the first time I met him was in a class about opera libretto. Scherzo. Okay, so here's like the first bit of the scherzo. Normal. Sorry. One of the goals in writing was I wanted to make sure I incorporated some what people call extended techniques into the music. By extended techniques or strange sounds, I mean, you know, not playing the instrument in the normal way. I wanted with each interlude to take Mendelssohn in some way. The way I used the Mendelssohn for the Moon is I took a recording of the Mendelssohn Scherzo, about the first 12 or so bars of it, and then I time stretched that on my computer to being about 4 minutes long. Okay, so that's 12 seconds. And then stretched out, time stretched, it sounds like this.
We had this idea of these dream pods, which had been strung together. They were going to be moved through the space. They were going to be pooled in the space. And so we really had to make aware what we needed to do around them so we wouldn't, you know, jump upon them or run into them so that it kind of defined the space of the dance a little bit. And the dancers were instrumental in moving them around at certain points, especially the first time Chelsea White enters with one of the first pod you see. She does a very ritualistic sort of lifting to the light and a placing of it was very much part of what dancers could contribute to that image that Ree had of the pod.
After the first few planning meetings, I met T, who's the other choreographer, and we just sat in the studio and we played all of the tracks from Mendelssohn and what we had from Hanstein. We were still waiting on a couple of his compositions, and we just had a totally free brainstorm, just kind of imagined every possible thing we could dream up, and then we started to break it down, what was doable, what could we do in the time that we had left. He was able to bring in Lucas, who's a wonderful dancer, who played sort of the Puck character. I brought in Candace for a solo to one of Hanstein's works, and then we had these wonderful 6 senior students from Mount Holyoke, dance majors.
I tend to be a very musical choreographer when I have a score, sort of in the realm of a Mark Morris type of choreographer, where if I hear something over and over again, I can imagine movement that it evokes in my imagination. And so as I listened to it, I could just think about what would happen when the music was repeating. I would repeat it in a different way, or if the music would go up and light, then I could have the dancers jumping. So it was like a music visualization of sorts. And so I had them going up and up and up, and then the music kind of cascaded down, and I had them fall back on the diagonal. So it's really visualizing what the music, I mean, I guess not everybody sees music that way, but I can very easily take a score and create movement to it. I mean, if I had to make a new piece without the score, it would be much more difficult. Then we had the choir. Lindsay Pope had beautiful singers that worked with some of the music.
I direct the choirs here at Mount Holyoke College, so my involvement was my choir sang in 2 movements in the overall work, and they were both part of Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream, 2 songs for women's choir. And the way that Tian structured the piece, he started at the end of the Mendelssohn, and then the last movement was the overture for the Mendelssohn. So we also sang our movements in reverse order. But simultaneously, while we were singing, it wasn't just a concert, also my singers served as kind of as props almost, or as the carriers of the props. And so we were the ones who would carry the dream pods onto the stage, who presented the dream pods and then brought them down and wrapped them around Rhee's kind of installation.
Dahlia and I started talking about how do we induct the audience into this world of dreams to begin with, and hence we came up with this idea of the pre-performance installation. This was a 30-minute long installation that starts before the actual show begins, and we wanted people to enter somewhere that was unfamiliar, and hence the smoke machine and the dim lighting. They felt the moment they stepped in that they're no longer in the world of the ordinary, and if we got it just right, they might even feel that they are already in the world of dreams.
The dreams that were eventually written out and put in the dream pods were recited in whispers that were barely intelligible and played kind of echoing throughout the space from these iPod devices. And the choir members were also reciting either lyrics, they were alternating between lyrics, or also the scripts of the dreams that were in the pods.
lighting is an absolutely crucial part of the production. And this is funny coming from a musician because that's the one thing we don't deal with. We don't really think about light. But, you know, it is important because one of the key elements of the production is the dream pods. And they lose their translucency and become just like a vague blob of white without the right lighting. And you certainly don't see the words that are written in them. So they were absolutely crucial to begin with. And then the other thing is that, you know, when we are talking about dance, it really is sculpture and time. And there are all these moving objects. And so it's never just the dancers, it's the dancers interacting with the light and hence the shadows. So that was absolutely crucial, the whole thing.
The wedding march comes through a few times in the work. The first piece, we had Candace dressed sort of as an odd bride, walking backwards.
One of my favorite moments was when I saw Candace, the main dancer, in that paper costume. That was a costume I had handmade totally from scratch. From plant fiber, I made the paper, this really thin, weightless, almost translucent paper, so that every time she moved, the paper would move just a second behind.
And so that was the kind of introduction of sort of a wedding scene, so that when it came through again later on in the work, we had the kind of step processional of the wedding march. And we had all these chorus members that weren't really trained movers but could do small, simple gestures. So we had them lean in together and make sort of a little tunnel through which people would walk. And so they'd peel off and come back around and make the tunnels. They'd cross the stage and come back through another tunnel. So it was a way of trying to involve the audience in the performance without it being too difficult for the audience to follow and for the chorus to pick up people and bring them through the process.
So one of the ways you can think about how a work of art, a theater piece is going is to think about how activity or emotional levels are at a peak or at a low as it goes through. So traditionally there's some kind of an introduction, and then things go to some kind of a climax, and then you have a resolution down. So if this is a traditional bell curve, as you will, it also reflects, dramatic action. So with Midwinter Dreams, we start with the Wedding March reprise. And so we are basically taking this chunk of what would have been Mendelssohn's incidental music and starting right up here. And then it comes down to some kind of a low. So having explained how the whole thing starts, and it really is an unexpected thing, what we have here in red is basically the overall, if you will, activity or emotional curve of the entire production. And you can kind of see how in some ways it deliberately avoids the traditional bell curve.
A lot of movement of lots of different things. The dancers were moving, the orchestra was moving, Rhee's pods were moving. Just the whole thing felt like it was sort of this ethereal, it wasn't really anchored until the very end when we all sort of came together to figure out how these things were all going to be put together.
T was very generous with the pre-performance installation, and then she really wanted to work with Scherzo, with the seniors. She asked me to do Flower, which is why I was happy to do, because it's a sort of hilarious piece that seemed very gestural to me.
At the penultimate piece, which is Nocturne by Mendelssohn, the pods rise very, very slowly from the clusters that they have formed on the floor, and they form a string of thoughts and a string of dreams, if you will, rising up to the heavens. Also, we were thinking of it as a dramatic moment, and if it's immersive and you feel objects rising, there is the sense of lift that you feel psychologically. As to why it happens where it happens, throughout the project we explore what dreams can be, what they are, some of them frivolous, some of them serious, and we wanted to make sure that this was a special moment. After having reflected on what dreams there are out there in the community and exploring with music and dance and movement, this was an intimate moment.
So I was relieved more than anything else. Actually, all of us were surprised at how well it came together we're really happy with the results.
The dream pods are beautiful, and so there's this art element, there's a lighting element. So he's turned what is normally just a concert hall piece into a theater piece. So the nocturne comes at a totally different part than it does in the normal piece. In this production, it comes near the very end. And the moment when Mendelssohn's nocturne starts and the dream pods start ascending, it was a pretty amazing moment. I mean, it was just a dress rehearsal, but I kind of started to get some shivers. It's really beautiful.
Then there was somebody in the audience who was actually professionally trained in dramaturgy and so on, and came up to me and said, you know, that was one of the most satisfying things that she has ever watched.
It's not like Tien went home and wrote a play, and it's like, no, we took an already existing beautiful work of art and we just sort of rethought how we're going to present it.
One of the dangers of such an organic creative process, and to give everyone so much kind of creative leeway, is, you know, whether it still makes sense as a production as a whole, whether the concept of Midwinter Dreams came across, and the many possibilities for people to kind of imagine and abstract from the production, whether that emerged and that was obvious. I just hope we get to do it again, you know, do something like that again, if not exactly the same thing. I know that my personal creative impulse is that of a very restless one, so even if it was the same thing, it would be probably quite different because of a lot of modifications and hopefully improvements, but quite likely it would be a completely different concept again.